Thanks very much. Thanks to all of you for joining us for what promises to be an all-star panel, and one with a wide perspective from really around the world. Some of you may know my work. Vous qui êtes Canadiens et qui parlent français me reconnaissent peut-être. Parce que je suis souvent sur le téléjournal. I'm a journalist with a long-standing interest, but no particular expertise in this field. Fortunately, you can help me by submitting questions on Slido, and I will keep an eye on my iPad as we go. But we're here to talk about international cooperation, and we're here to talk in the wake of a very significant development, which is the G7 summit that just ended, and 2 days ago, the G7 leaders released the Kananaskis Common Vision for the Future of Quantum Technologies. And we're lucky to have among our panelists today, Lisa Lambert from Quantum Industries Canada, who can tell us a little bit about how that came to happen and begin a conversation about what the significance of that G7 statement is. Lisa, what just happened?
Thanks, Paul. For the first time ever, we've seen quantum elevated to the G7 leaders level, which I think is quite a significant moment and a really meaningful one for the global quantum economy to have it raised to that agenda. It was quite an interesting year for the G7, I think we can say as well, and seeing this drive forward and being put forward as a priority is an interesting turn of events within that, but I think a recognition too of some of the geopolitical shifts that are happening right now, and some of the recognition I think as well that a lot of the world's most advanced economies are advanced technology economies. And I think this is aligned with a few different points coming together. There was yesterday we were talking about this beforehand, is that it's really an inflection point with quantum. Hemingway is much better with words than I am, but he's talked about how dramatic change happens. It's gradually, then suddenly. And we've had the gradually happening for over 100 years now. And we know the suddenly is coming, and it's coming sooner than we think. And there's an opportunity, we really need to be preparing for this. With quantum, these are technologies that are going to fundamentally disrupt the digital backbone we built our entire economy on. We need to be looking at how are we quantum ready and quantum enabled as we move forward. And this isn't a quick thing to do, and I think we've discovered that a little bit over the past couple of days. It does take that preparedness, it takes that coordination, and it takes, I think, a real vision and steadfast commitment going forward. And I'm hoping with this statement is a bit of a recognition of that and a way to invite the right stakeholders together to move that forward. And we're really eager, actually, to be a part of that. And that's where I think where we came in back in October, we wrote a letter to then Prime Minister of Canada, urging them to put this on the agenda. And we're really happy to see it move forward.
Thierry, we have talked a lot over the last day about the tension between national ambition and a national sovereignty and security mission versus the imperative of international cooperation. Is that tension resolvable? Is it, how has that played in attempts to get international cooperation and statements like what we saw from the G7 this week?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Paul. And just before I get to it, a big thanks to the organizers. Merci aux organisateurs, Industrie Quantique Canada, District, de nous accueillir ici. Pour moi, c'est personnellement vraiment un plaisir de pouvoir parler un peu au nom de l'industrie quantique européenne. So to your question, Paul, I think it's a really delicate question, and I think the angle, the perspective on it differs if you're government, if you're industry. Government naturally look at their borders and want to secure key transformative technologies like quantum technologies to secure their technological sovereignty for the decades ahead. For industry, there's a perspective of how do we stay competitive, how do we make ourselves stand out in this very dynamic area and one that has a long-term promise. Those two will eventually meet each other. And exactly in what way this all shakes out, how exactly industry will come to evolve is going to be determined in the years to come. Yes, it is solvable. Yes, it will be solved. And I think the conversation that started at the G7 is that first step in making sure that governments understand the challenges that faces the many companies we represent together. And also for companies to be sensitive to that call from governments and to bake that into their own business plans, business evolutions as they consider their expansions abroad, the mergers, the acquisitions they may do, to view it also knowing the landscape and the geopolitics in which they operate. So short answer is yes, but it will take this conversation that really just started with the G7, has already happened to some extent at every government level and more informally, to now continue forward to really sort out these two visions that are coming together.
Celia Merzbacher, same question. Why is this, to the extent that it is, a propitious moment for international cooperation in a field where a lot of the work is happening at the level of laboratories and startup companies? What's the role for, not just for national governments, but for national governments cooperating?
I think you just highlighted one of the aspects that is somewhat important for quantum technology. That is, it's early stage, there's a lot going on at the fundamental levels, and that's a natural place to do collaboration and cooperation across researchers around the world. They go to conferences, and it happens almost organically. And I think in this case, the tendency of governments to want to protect and close exchanges goes against the fact that no one country has such a large advantage that it makes sense to do that, to build a wall. There's innovation happening everywhere. And so, you could say the genie's out of the bottle or something. I mean, it just is, it's not a good strategy to try to protect through those kinds of controls yourself. Now, you can do some working with allies and partners to make a bigger wall, so to speak, a group of like-minded countries that are willing to follow norms and trade amongst each other. And I think that's very helpful, in fact, at this time, because the partnerships and the supply chains and the expertise and the customers and markets are very much globally distributed. So I think there are a lot of points in the value chain, from the basic research up to the supply chains and the alliances and joint ventures, that really depend on international collaborations.
Jonathan Laysmith, even in the language of the communique, there's a tension between international cooperation and national sovereignty. And also, there's a reference to securing quantum supply chains, which is a friend-shoring kind of notion, that there's like-minded countries, and then there's the rest of the world, and we have to make sure that the like-minded countries can continue to operate in a sometimes surprising environment.
That's absolutely true. I mean, obviously the communique was balancing word, but I think securing global supply chains is a necessary thing. I mean, the nature of like-minded countries is the majority of countries. We are already collaborating. We already have those relationships across many industries. I think the nature of securing the supply chains is as much about making sure that they are in place, as well as the national security sort of aspect to it, because we are still a young industry and the supply chains are still forming behind us. So securing it is as much about making sure those things line up. I think the national sovereignty, there's national interest. I mean, within the UK, we have always had an open approach to quantum technologies, but most technologies really, in terms of the R&D and also the commercialization. But our programs are focused around the interests of the UK. How can we deliver value into the UK economy? Because ultimately we want to see businesses adopt that. So the programs are constructed around the national interests, but they're open to collaboration because, as Celia said, we need to be working with the expertise from around the world to actually deliver this. So there's a difference between sovereignty, protectionism, but actually what's in your national interest and how you collaborate to achieve that.
Okay. Shimada-san, I was really struck when I read the composition of the board of the group that you lead, QStar, because it's not just, it's different from a lot of national groups in that it's not quantum startups plus IBM. Yeah. It is a list of the largest companies in Japan. Yeah. Toyota, NTT, NEC, Hitachi, Fujitsu. Right. It seems to me that a group like that comes together when there is a strong sense of a national mission for quantum in Japan. I mean, am I guessing correctly? Or?
Well, I mean, all those companies that you mentioned is basically a very global company anyway. So it's not like we are creating, allies of the Japan or anything like that. It's more like how we can actually avoid the situation we faced in 1980s and things like that. And win-win situation have to be there. All the countries we operate, we work. Otherwise, it's causing all kinds of problems. So I really like to say that this G7's agreement is a good news for everybody who wants to do the business, right? How we can actually avoid is things like supply chain. What happened in a semiconductor, people are really surprised that you are depending on that and that. So by early engaging G7 nations to be able to understand that how it looks like the quantum ecosystem is, so that there's no supplies when you have some of the conflict problems. So that's the kind of an idea that we should engage early, rather than that's what's going on, and stop this and stop that. This is a really disruption for the business. So one thing, this is very good for the business, and we wanted to make sure that the government is fine with this in the early stage, and we wanted to make the standardization correct so that we can do the, we have to adapt that any different country you go, you have to adapt the different regulations and all that kind of stuff. It's actually bad for the business.
It strikes me that one advantage of having this kind of language in an international statement, promoting public and private investment, ensuring that the benefits are available to all stakeholders, including those traditionally left out, is that, and Thierry, I'll throw it to you, stakeholders and companies and researchers can then turn around to governments and say, look, you said you would do this. Is that a handy tool for the next steps?
Yeah, I think it certainly is. We say it somewhat lightly, but I really think it's sort of a commitment and engagement by these G7 countries saying, this is how we want to help pioneer, accelerate this quantum sector. And having this now written, it's something that we collectively, not just as individual countries or businesses from individual countries, but as an entire sector market, can keep governments and say, look, you've established quantum as being important, essential. You've committed yourselves and your members, companies, individuals, to strive for this. This is how we hope to get there collectively. So I do think that it really serves as a tool to also remind governments of that engagement, that commitment they took. And I'd like to take the opportunity to underline 2 points that were made. I think Shimada-san is quite correct to say this G7 announcement is a positive. It's the marker of a beginning, not an achievement, but something that's about to come. And also with Celia saying that the genie's out of the bottle. Quantum, the research that's been done, the research that got us to this point and to this announcement has been very international to begin with. People have crossed borders, people have been studying in different places. Companies themselves have been founded by people from different parts of the world. So that network, that connection is already there. And what we're seeing today is simply the next step in that. Now, because we're having the conversation early, because the statement is now out there, it gets everyone to be aware of where we are and, again, structure the future together as a like-minded collective.
But Celia, there are obstacles to international cooperation, and one is occasional obstacles to knowledge workers crossing national borders. Your own association spoke to a congressional committee last year before the election and talked about how a lot of your members say that there's a lack of available candidates with the right to work in the United States, and it takes a very long time to get a visa to come into the United States. I have to assume that's not getting better. How do these concerns get reconciled?
Well, I don't have the data to answer the question on trends and whether or not, perhaps in the spirit of efficiency, some of the systems are getting better. We'll see the results of that. But the immigration problem is not unique to quantum, of course. I think skilled and high-tech workforce is something that the industry in the United States struggles with, and I cannot say that in my recent opportunity to speak to Congress, when I asked the members of QED-C, what do you want me to be sure to remember to bring to their attention, this was one of the topics. Please help with the immigration problem. So it does continue to be way too sort of lengthy and burdensome. And when I talk to the students who are finishing their degrees and want to stay, the foreign students, for them, they see sort of a cliff approaching, and there's a lot of uncertainty for the students as well. So I don't think anybody is particularly happy. I really admire what Canada has done to accelerate and make it easy for skilled workers to come and take advantage of the wonderful opportunities at the companies that are exhibiting here and elsewhere in the country. So I would like the US to take a page out of the playbook up here.
There's been a little bit of talk about how this is an inflection moment, that the next 5 years are different from the last 20. Who wants to put some meat on the bones of that idea? I think maybe Shimada-san, you seem to nod every time I talk about that.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Just to be nice to you, but anyway. I think, the progress of this, the new finding about the quantum qubit numbers, and then also the fidelity going up and all those things, really amazing. I guess I said that same thing in the last panel too, but I manage all kinds of different technologies as a company CEO of the Toshiba. But this quantum technology is kind of squeezing the timeline every time we see that checking up the new things. So that's quite promising. So from that perspective, I think now is really important timing to define the standards or architecture so that we can actually take off very easily. The sign is already there everywhere almost. So that's why that even that many of the end customers start saying that, oh, we have to get prepared, at least the security, because they are very much worried about that the security will be breached. So that kind of already showing that we are getting very closely to a tipping point.
Okay. Anyone else on that?
I'll add that I believe that the way that things will likely go in the coming 5 years is that the capability of these systems, we're focusing especially, I guess, on quantum computing, will improve to the point where researchers in the lab, and I'm sort of a reformed scientist, you give a scientist a new tool and they will take it very quickly and start using it and figuring out what they can do and applying it to their area. And so as the performance of the tools gets better, at some point those scientists are going to start using it, and there will be just a blossoming of uses that are sort of discovered or applications that come out of that. They'll be much faster to take up these new technologies and use them than a bank or a medical institution or insurance company or something. So, and that will all follow. So I think in that 5-year window, we will see this blossoming of use of the tools, and that will feed back and it will improve. You can sort of, if you're old enough, recall how that worked in computing. People were, hacking their PCs and putting boards in there and figuring out what to do with them. And we're entering, I think, with this inflection, that period. Now, these systems are typically, at this point, not homebrew done in somebody's garage. They're going to be accessed via the cloud, and but that's already the case. So I think there's going to be easy access, and that maybe speaks to some of the availability globally. There are concerns about digital divide and so on. It's quite possible that through cloud access, these technologies would be quite widely available, in fact, I think.
is this standardization imposed or achieved through wide take-up? Is there a standards association, or should there be? Or?
There certainly is, and maybe Jonathan should speak to that. He has a lot more standards background and experience.
I mean, yes, so there's an organization called ISO-IEC, which is essentially the Global International Standards Organization, or rather one of a few. And they recently set up a new technical committee specifically to work on quantum standardization. And that's the first major one in memory, to be honest. So that has started, but we also see it in the sort of traditional areas like the telecoms area where it sort of lives on standardization as well. So we see the international and regional standards organizations becoming very active in that as well. So the whole machinery is starting to gear up. And we also see countries recognizing the importance of it, which is also part of the inflection point, I think. Governments preparing for the maturing of an industry. I mean, it's not just the capabilities, it's making sure the standards processes are in place, making sure the regulations are in place about how it gets used, making sure, obviously, the education systems are going to be delivering the skills. All of those are signs of governments recognizing the industry is going to be mature, and they now need to prepare for that as well.
I've got two questions from the floor, and the second one's a bit of a humdinger. So I'll start with the first one. And that's the question of ensuring that the benefits and the collaboration includes end users and those affected by quantum technologies, even if they're not directly involved in their development. Taro, Shimada, you have spoken about a chat GPT future for quantum, which is a situation where large parts of populations are using quantum without even being aware that that's the technology they're using. Is that kind of democratization and deep diffusion of the technology a goal that should be pursued, and how do you pursue it?
Yeah, I think everybody's already talked about it, but you know, it's not really dividing that the AI and quantum, but AI and quantum altogether to solving a problem. From the end user perspective, it doesn't matter whether this is a quantum technology was used or not, but we want to solve this problem. For example, especially drug discovery or, material, those static problem is once you figure out what drug should be or what the material looks like, then that's it. So first one who actually discovered is the winner. So whether this will be much more better just using AI or using a quantum mean nothing to an end customer. If you can get there or not. So having said that, that means that whatever we can use today have to be integrated in the current digital system easily, so that the end of the day, end customer can use it and solve it and find out their value over there.
Okay. The other question was about China. China does more, invests more in quantum research than all of the G7 countries combined, and is in many ways antagonistic or perceived as antagonistic to the goals of the G7. And the question, again, from the floor, but that is all the more relevant because there are so many security applications of quantum technology. Is this an arms race? Who wants that one?
Well, none of us is representing our government, so with that in mind,
yes.
I think that it is in some ways, and we haven't touched on this known application of quantum computing for breaking encryption. It's a well understood threat, and that alone means none of the Western countries wants to not come in first, or among the allied group, the G7, let's say, or NATO. And so for that reason, sometimes there's also this question about, is there going to be a quantum winter? Are we in a hype cycle and it's going to crash before it somehow comes out the other side? I think this threat side is going to mean that governments continue to support the development, and there's less likely to be a real winter. There may be ups and downs along the way there. That was reported yesterday by one of the speakers. So because of the national security piece of it, the dual use nature of it, there is a sort of sense of an arms race. But just like the space race was sort of both for defense and beneficial purposes and science reasons, quantum is sort of similar, I would say. So there will be that to deal with from a government side as well as from the business side.
Yeah, I would like to answer in a little bit different way. My view, why China is spending so much money is actually they are already start implementing. While we are still discussing about whether we should do this and do that, they just do, right? I mean, once you do that, you can understand a lot more. So that's the problem that we have right now. I mean, we're still discussing about whether this technology is better or that. They don't care. They would test it on the ground. So that's the thing that I think that have to worry about looking at the number that the Chinese people is putting. So that's something that we have to collectively working together to start implementing quantum technology.
Are you aware
Can I
of
follow
cases
up on the numbers metric? Because first of all, there's sort of apples and oranges. So I think this big number that you hear out of China includes building a whole campus dedicated with buildings and all kinds of facilities, which our research dollars in the US doesn't include that kind of spending. So there's that apples and oranges piece. And also, as a former policymaker, I would meet often with people who say, we've got to double the amount we're spending on this. And there's just pouring more money in is not enough. It's important. If you don't have that oxygen, you won't live.
Yeah.
But you need to create an environment where things can flourish and ideas can grow. And having a top-down approach is better if it's more mature. When you have a lot of ideas still kind of taking root, I think the top-down approach risks leaving some real innovative ideas behind, and so, or unsustained. So there's sort of pros and cons, I think, to either approach that need to be kept in mind.
They're spending a lot of money building campuses that resemble the campuses that already exist in Western.
I'm not saying we don't need infrastructure as well, but it's just the numbers, when you just look at our number versus their number, is not an apples to apples number comparison.
Anybody else on that specific question of China, which is a pretty question?
I think it's an unavoidable and, although not present, a very powerful catalyst for the development of quantum technologies. Governments today, and it was said already yesterday, are the primary acquirers of quantum technologies at this early stage of our sector. The reason they're there is because they see the potential, and also they understand this sovereignty aspect, this strategic aspect for them. And so there is, in the background, from a government standpoint, a bit of a race, and they want to keep plowing forward. They want to keep pushing forward. That said, beyond that, there is also the business perspective. And companies, wherever they are, don't want to be caught off guard, short-sighted or short-handed by competitors that are from other parts of the world, including from China. So this is less of an arms race, more of a just business imperative to stay on top, stay ahead of your competitors, those that you probably see and meet in these types of events, but also those that are less present, less visible, but are also being pushed and fed from their government side in China. So as we look ahead, from today's world where governments are still the primary acquirers of quantum tech to a not so distant future where businesses, industries of all sorts of applications, and it's true, the research community will help to sort of highlight where some of these opportunities are. In that future, companies that are getting their quantum tech to improve their own solutions to their customers, they're going to be less mindful of where these technologies are from, whether it's from one of our countries or somewhere else, and they're simply going to want to have the best. And so from a company today, you want to put yourself in the best position for that in the future, you're the primary person that these companies, these users want to go to.
If I can just add too, I think there's a misconception with quantum that quantum is niche, and it's not.
No.
And quantum is a general purpose technology, it's a technology platform, and it's really going to come into its fullness as it's interacting and playing with the real world, and it's going to be disrupting for industries all over the place. And I think that's something with, as you were saying,
Yes.
with China, like they're getting it out there and they're getting with it where innovation happens. Yes, there's that R&D phase as it's coming forward, but where you see that real innovation is where it is playing with the real world and you're putting towards actually solving real business solutions.
Yeah.
And I think we often take for granted that we use quantum technologies every day. If we look at the GPS system that probably a lot of us use to get here, if we look at lasers, if we look at semiconductors that we rely on, our whole world is quantum. We're now at a new stage of where we're at with these capabilities, but we don't even think about it. And seeing that being that first wave, and it's, we talked about the second quantum revolution, that means there was this first one. The potential of the second one is huge, and I think China certainly recognizes that. I'm hopeful with the G7 statement that we're seeing that recognition from other countries. And I think it's, with the race that's going on, it's an interesting race because I don't believe that any one company can win this race on their own.
No.
I don't think any one country can either, and going back to the complexities of the value chains and the supply chains with it. So it is going to require that collaboration, but we're going to have to figure out how do we move fast together on this kind of stuff so that we're going forward and we're doing this in a way that we are bringing that broader benefit forward.
Once again, I think this is the avoiding a surprise that we have encountered during the COVID in semiconductor. So if we can understand that how it looks like and how we can actually avoid the situation in the first place, that's what we really need to do in quantum technologies. So that's the importance of the G7's agenda to working together.
But Lisa, working in a Canadian industry association with a new Canadian government, you probably see all the time the extent to which this government, newish, almost only ever talks about this sector in the context of national sovereignty. We're going to keep our talent, we're going to keep our companies, and that's against a backdrop of a long tradition where Canadian companies stay Canadian until they're ready to become American. How does that play in your conversations with government and with member organizations?
Yeah, and I think this is a broader thing than just quantum in Canada right now, but I think Canada is a country that, when I think of Canadians, I think of the word ingenuity. I think it's one of our superpowers going forward. We have pioneered so many of these technologies. We've struggled with the value capture piece of that. And we are a very open economy. We do need to be collaborating with that, but I think there's an opportunity where we need to be thinking about how is this going to play into a prosperity driver going forward, and a prosperity driver for this country beyond our traditional lens of we're a natural resource country. We're also a really incredible technology country, and there's more opportunity to bring that forward. So the sense I have with government, I won't speak for them, there's a number of them in the room that can speak to this, but it's really been a good collaboration going forward, I would say, and even with the National Quantum Strategy that was announced a few years ago, QIC was part of that, and there was funding given to us, and I think that's a really strong recognition of the public-private partnership that's needed to move this forward. And even QIC's mission was very intentional from how it was set forward. It was how do we translate Canada's incredible quantum capabilities into prosperity and global business success. So we're trying to do something different. Now's the time with that, and I think it's one where Canada can really lead and have these going forward. And I think it's also, what's interesting with quantum, it's not locked up in the big companies right now. A lot of startups people have never heard of, a lot of the startups that are here are doing some of the most interesting work in the world with that. So it's one of those, with this time of inflection, you can see the turn and you can see these new or the future global tech titans are coming out of this, and there's a real shot for Canadian companies and other small companies from all our countries to have a part of that.
Thierry, have European countries had to learn to cooperate in this field, or is the European Union model so deeply entrenched that community level cooperation is just taken as given?
Yeah, really good question. In Europe, this idea of developing a technology together, what in many other countries would be an industrial policy, is a really novel and uncomfortable, really, concept for Europe. There's a real momentum by European governments to want to create a EU-wide quantum community with companies that are champions from Europe and able to offer their technologies, their solutions to the globe. So there is that desire, but getting there is an extremely difficult and even uncharted path forward for Europe. By design, the European Union was a coming together to foster trade between countries, avoid national champions directly competing, which caused a lot of problems for Europe in the past. So we're now in a world where, okay, we want to work together, but exactly how do we do that as a union of different sovereign countries is a really difficult aspect. So what we're witnessing today in Europe is that countries, the EU 27 members, are coming together. They actually signed a declaration saying, we want to support quantum technologies. We want to work on this together. This was done about a year ago. Now it's about getting that into motion and seeing exactly how this comes to be. And this is where, in the background, countries are working together. They're trying to sort out this conundrum, this challenge. And exactly how this will all come together is unclear. But there's some big moments coming up for Europe. In about 2 weeks' time, on July 2nd, the EU will announce its quantum strategy. This will be an important moment to sort of lay to the ground. How does the Union at its very highest echelons, the European Commission, sees the future for itself in quantum? And that will set the stage for a next step, which will be an EU Quantum Act. So a legal document that binds countries together, governance, funding behind that. And the spirit, the goal will certainly be to catalyze a Europe-wide quantum industry. But again, exactly how this will happen, the mechanisms behind it, it's being determined right now.
Jonathan, Britain's relation to the rest of Europe has changed while you've been in this field. Has it changed the way that you work and the way that your organizations work with the rest of Europe? In a lot of fields, Brexit barely happened because there's not a lot of political tension, and I think this might be one of them. But
yes, I mean, I'm pleased to say we're almost past that moment now. But for a number of years, the UK was excluded from the major quantum flagship program, which was problematic for UK industry, but also the European companies who did want to partner with their counterparts. So that was an issue. I mean, in a sense, it had been carved out because once the UK had reached its settlements, it was able to engage with the majority of the R&D programs, but quantum was separated out. That's changed in the last 5-6 months. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops. And it was a problem, and it was a concern as to why this was happening. Industry did not want this. Academia did not want this. There was something political. And many individual nations did not want this. There was something peculiar going on at the high levels. But that's passed. We look forward to seeing it. Looking forward to seeing, the resolution of how the individual European nations collaborate and work together, because of course that's what the UK wants to do, is to be able to work with them collectively. If it still remains a set of individual nations, then that would be problematic for all of us.
Okay. We've got a bit more than 10 minutes left, and I wonder what the future likes. Celia, you come to a conference like this because international cooperation clearly matters, and I assume you're not sort of, well, the G7 put out a statement, we're done. What's the to-do list over the next few years look like?
Well, that's a always growing list. When I talk to the members of QED-C, and I will just remind everyone that it's a global consortium now, so we do have members from across the world, from selected or approved countries, 39 different ones now, including several of the exhibitors here from Canada. So when I ask those companies, what keeps you up at night? What do you need in order to succeed? And most of them are small to mid-sized companies or startups. They want to know what are the use cases. So I always look to QStar as the sort of gold standard of bringing the end user community into the conversation early on. I think we all would like to do that, and Quantum Now is about taking a step in that direction. So the companies that are making stuff, the quantum makers, want to talk to the quantum takers and bridging that gap, because it's hard to make a general purpose technology right out of the box.
Yeah.
It's more likely to be application specific in some way and designed for a purpose, whether it's for analyzing drugs or optimizing financial portfolios or some other purpose, designing something that solves a problem, and especially for a small company, they can't sort of boil the ocean. So working with those customers and developing solutions that then can be more broadly applied over time. So I think all of this involves, because the customers are worldwide, figuring out how to make those connections from the people who are doing the R&D and the development with the broad community of customers in a particular sector is something that we're at QED-C trying to do more and better. And this is a fantastic event, but in some ways we are sort of preaching to the choir, and my resolve is to spend more time going to meetings where those customers are gathering. Go to the biotech companies at their meeting, go to some other sectors meeting. I went to one for the oil and gas industry recently. So there are these opportunities where you can go and say, what are your problems, and help them to appreciate that quantum could be a solution. So those are all international scale kind of activities, as well as the standards piece, which is inherently international and really requires the communities to come together across borders and agree on standards as they become, as the time gets right. I did want to add one thing about standards. There's this concept of sort of standardization readiness. When is a technology ready for standards? And it can be too early or it can be too late. So there's sort of a sweet spot when it really is ideal time to set standards in order to allow innovation to accelerate and go forward.
Shimada-san.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention about the use cases. It's very important. So that's why that we are actually try to approach the end user companies executive as much as possible. Because always some of the people inside of a company who wants to touch the quantum, but if they don't have executive support to doing this, then it's very difficult to do. So we are regularly holding at the executive level seminar and meeting and technology explanation what can be done to educate the end customer from the beginning. That's why that we are including a great company like Toyota and others to make them understand that what quantum can be done. So also that about the standard meaning that the people, depending on the people, standard meaning a little different. I mean, many of the people, standard is like a very precise standard, how you can actually exactly do. And those are the kind of things take 10 years or 20 years to finish it. But there is many, kind of a very flex standard, like XML, for example. Those are the kind of things that we actually required now in a quantum area, so that anybody can do a different implementation, but we have a sort of simple rules. If you follow that, you can actually part of the ecosystem, plug in your system very easily. And those are the kind of things we need to discuss within the G7 group to make the quantum is actually implemented.
If I can just add another point too, because I think that's the commercialization angle of it, which is really, really important key in moving it forward. But there's also the industrialization. And I feel like right now we've gotten really good at I almost think of it as like manufacturing these artisanal quantum machines at this small scale. And a lot of companies are working with university labs and facilities, and they're relying on grad students to be doing this. And you're at the mercy of a grad student, bless them that they're doing a great job with it. But something goes wrong and they're behind months in their work with this. And we really need to be looking at how are we industrializing and building the capabilities to manufacture this stuff moving forward. And there's tremendous value capture within that. We can just think about that with semiconductors right now and where that's concentrated. There's opportunity right now if you look at just where quantum capabilities are. If you go down even further, fewer countries have the capabilities to be manufacturing them going forward, and this stuff takes time. It's not easy, and if we're going through value chains, everything we need from helium-3 over in Saskatchewan to fabs facilities, the critical minerals, all those pieces need to come together for it, and it takes some foresight to plan. And we've got the opportunity right now, I think, to go and look ahead and be strategic in how we're doing this. How are we doing this through partnership, instead of being caught in the moment where we've been with semis, where we're, it's very expensive to try and reshore these capabilities and build those out. So I think it's a really key piece that's going forward. And again, that's another area where there's that collaboration across borders is going to be needed.
It sounds like a missing piece is a certain level of self-awareness in the market. That, I mean, Celia talked about essentially guiding customers to realize that they could be customers. You know, a huge motor of progress is a response to consumer demand. Do producers need to work on generating that demand and making, and then how do you do that?
I mean, they all are. I mean, D-Wave, Allison was here yesterday, that's one of her jobs. And so all the individual companies are doing that, and organizations like ours are doing a lot to help put out information. We have a public website with reports on use cases of quantum for X, and X can be everything from biomedicine to transportation to finance. You know, so we just keep doing this over and over in different areas and putting that out so that those communities can see what the use cases are and why they should be paying attention now. Because I think there's a misconception, and I give Shimada-san a ton of credit because you're in a role, in a position where you can bring along your peers, and that's so important at this point in time. So big thank you to you. It's very important because most of the people running companies, maybe this is a US thing, are not deep technical experts, and so they're A, very distracted by AI right now when it comes to technology, and B, they're often, you know, responding to quarterly statements and projections and businesses as if they're publicly traded. And so when you come in and say, this is something that's going to be really impactful for your business in 3 to 5 years, they say, well, come back in 2.5 years and tell me more.
Shimada-san.
Yeah, I think it is important to have a partnership ecosystem. Because if you wanted to solve the specific problem, you have to have a domain knowledge, not necessarily to the expert in a quantum. Yeah. So it's not really just the quantum people who can actually creating a quantum industry. It's the people who actually have an engineer who can actually, you know, using a quantum technology. And those kind of a partnership ecosystem is very important. In order to make really that the quantum technology useful. And once again, in order to do this, we need to have a kind of a loose concept of the standard so that the people can working on system integrated into that specific needs for the different customer.
We're very close to the end of the panel, and I shouldn't ask a new question, but to hell with it. Shimada-san, in your remarks over the last couple of days, there's a consistent theme, which is a sense of urgency that you worry is not widely shared enough. Have I properly understood your position?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, now you're going to have to talk for another minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah. That's right.
But that's
yeah.
That a moment will be lost if people don't realize that the moment is here.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
It's you know, sometimes I do a surfing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And surfing, in order to do that, you have to, you know, after the wave is gone, there's no way you can actually ride on the wave. You have to looking at back the wave is coming and which way we wanna, and then also the timing of that when you ride on the surfboard is very important. That's what it is. So if you're not looking back and what is coming, then you're just missing.
There's nothing a moderator hopes for more than a compelling metaphor to wrap a session. Thank you. To all of our panelists who are constantly on the lookout for waves to surf and who really helped us understand this part of the field a little better, thanks so much, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.